We're only a week away from the start of the NFL preseason. It's been a long off season, and it's crazy to say that football is right around the corner. But after watching the quarterback series on Netflix, it put me in the mood for football, and it put me in the mood to rank all 32 NFL starting quarterbacks. So that's what we're going to do today. But before we get into that, we're on the road to 500 subs on the channel, and we can't get there without you guys. So if you enjoy the channel at any point, please support us down below. Whether if you like or just subscribe, it all goes a very long way. But without further ado, let me know your thoughts down below, who I have too high, too low. This is the Anomaly Podcast. Let's jump into these quarterbacks. Alright, we're over here on TierMaker, very popular website. I'm sure you've seen a lot of your favorite YouTubers or just yourself on this website ranking different stuff, but it's a very quick and simple way to rank these quarterbacks, and visually you can see where I have these guys as well. But to kick off our quarterbacks list, at the very bottom, and again, these are all rookies. I don't believe these are the worst 3 NFL starting quarterbacks, but we haven't seen these guys at the highest level yet, and we might not even see these guys yet this season. But Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, the 3 highest drafted quarterbacks in this past NFL draft, here at the very bottom, just because we haven't seen them at the highest level yet. Very simple, right? Aside from the rookies, we're going to throw a guy in there by the name of Sam Howell, starting quarterback for the Washington Commanders. This is a guy that only has 1 game of NFL experience, and he looked okay in that game. He's coming into a year as a starter from day 1 in Washington. He has the weapons offensively, most notably you have guys like Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin. I can imagine your job will be a lot easier than it was in years prior, but regardless, he's going to have the starting job from day 1 in year 2 of his career. He now has Eric Bieniemy coming over from the Kansas City Chiefs to be the offensive mind of this offense. So everything is at his disposal to take a step up, but can he put it together? Can he put it together to get some wins? Or at the end of the day, is Washington just using him as a stepping stone for Caleb Williams? Hopefully for Washington, or for Sam Howell, hopefully he could put it together and be the Washington's guy going forward. But for Washington, I think you're in a pretty good spot either way, right? Because you either get Sam Howell or you're going to be in a position to get Caleb Williams next NFL draft, right? If I can talk correctly. But moving over to the next guy in this tier, and it's going to be Jordan Love. I personally love his game. I thought he was one of the best talents in the draft class that he was a couple years back out of Utah State. He has the size of a franchise guy at 6'4", 230 or whatever, but he has the ideal size. He has a crazy arm. He has good touch, and it's now his turn to take over a loaded Packers roster after learning for 2 or 3 years from one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Well, definitely the best quarterback of the Packers franchise history in Aaron Rodgers. So he's taking over after a legend, and I don't expect to see any crazy win increases this year for the Packers, right? But I just want to see improvement from Jordan Love this year, and if he can do that, he will move up these rankings. But for now, we haven't seen enough to move him past this set of rankings here, the bottom 6 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. Moving over to the Desmond Ridder, if I can find him on the screen here, as again, he's a guy who took over late last season after Marcus Mariota had his off-the-field issues. Desmond Ridder showed some flashes right out of Cincinnati, and I'd just like to see a little bit more out of him this year with Atlanta, a team that has promised to win their division maybe and make some noise in the playoffs. They have a underrated roster, and it all starts with Desmond Ridder to take that next jump, right? And again, I'd like to see a little bit more out of him this year. He's going to have the job from day 1, and if they can make some noise, Desmond Ridder, no doubt, is going to be a big part of that, and we'll move up these rankings. And final quarterback in this tier is going to be Baker Mayfield. As a Browns fan who didn't want anything to do with Baker from day 1, I remember, looking over to my brother and my dad, and as rumors started to heat up, I said in that draft, I was like, if the Browns draft Baker Mayfield, I am no longer a Browns fan. I wanted nothing to do with this guy from day 1. Ironically, I wanted a guy of Josh Allen, right? But even in hindsight, again, that is 2020, but even in the moment when I wanted Josh Allen, I knew we weren't going to be able to develop Josh Allen to what he is today, and Baker Mayfield would probably be in Buffalo doing the same of Josh Allen, not to diminish what Josh Allen has done, that's just the Browns' luck. But I can't sit here and say that Baker didn't come to Cleveland and at least change the culture here in Cleveland. And I mean, I'm not going to lie, it was kind of fun winning with a guy like Baker Mayfield. The underdog, a guy who's undersized, but he has that attitude and that grit to come in each and every week, each and every year to win multiple games. It was fun winning with him, and he changed the culture here. But to me, production was just not always there with Baker Mayfield. He's in a situation now that I said he should have been in after leaving the Browns, right? I said he should have left the Browns to join the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to learn from Tom Brady for a couple of weeks here before Tom Brady retired. I said that here on this podcast. Maybe he tried to reach out and maybe he tried to, sit behind Brady. But I think he was so desperate to get into another role with Carolina at the starting position that now his career's in jeopardy, and regardless of how he plays this year, his future might be up in the air as far as starting jobs. It's kind of like the Mitch Trubisky situation, where Mitch Trubisky, he left Chicago, right, and he had another starting job, but then it quickly fizzled out there in Pittsburgh. And Baker Mayfield, same situation. He might be a career backup now after this stint here in Tampa Bay. Regardless, he might be in the same situation of a guy like Sam Howell, where he might be another stepping stone for a guy like Caleb Williams or even Drake May out of North Carolina. It'll be interesting to see how Tampa plays out this year, but definitely interested to see how Baker plays, as he's a fun player to watch. I'll say that at the very, very least. But moving over to the 21 through 25 tier, and to be honest, we're going to start this tier at the bottom at 25, right? I don't want to get that confused if we have to rank these players. But at 25, I'm going to go with a guy like Mac Jones. And I'm on the fence with a guy like Mac Jones, as year one, he steps in out of Alabama, playoff appearance with a team that just lost Tom Brady. Year two, he was in and out of the lineup, and Bailey Zappe at times, Patriots fans were calling to be the next quarterback of this team moving forward. But Mac Jones ultimately took the job back. I mean, this is a guy that is smart with the ball. He can make some plays. But with Matt Patricia as his offensive coordinator last year, it was very hard for him to show anything on the football field. Matt Patricia is now back to the defensive coordinator, like he always should have been. Bill O'Brien is now back as the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. So maybe we get a Mac resurgence this year, but based off of how bad he looked last year, Mac Jones, I can't move him any higher than to number 25 here in the NFL. But moving over to number 24, I'm going to go with Mr. Irrelevant, a guy who came in last year for the 49ers, sat behind Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo. Both of those guys went down. He stepped in for the Niners, a team that was desperate to continue their hot streak and make the playoffs and compete for a Super Bowl. He did okay, right? I think he did his part, I'd say, as he came in, went 7-1 as a starter, and was only a game away from the NFL Super Bowl, right? He's going to be sturdy Purdy for them again this year, and I think it'll be exciting to see what he can do from day one with the starting job. But what is the condition of his elbow is the point I'm getting at, right? Is that going to hinder his progression this year with this 49ers club? Hopefully not. Hopefully Brock Purdy can come in and be the guy he was last year and be that guy that can put this Niners team over the top. Mr. Irrelevant. It's an amazing story, but Brock Purdy is definitely a top 25 quarterback here for me in 2023. Moving over to number 23, we're going to go with Jimmy G. He's okay, right? He's the game manager in the NFL. And if you have Jimmy G, you're going to win a lot of games. And that's all you can really ask for out of the quarterback position. But Jimmy G's now on the move. He went from San Fran to Las Vegas. I was going to say Oakland, but to Las Vegas. And there were some questions with his physical, if he was even going to be able to play. But he's got that all settled out now. Jimmy G he's going to be the quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders. It'll be interesting to see how quickly him and Josh McDaniels can get back on the same page, because of course they had some chemistry there in New England. Moving over to number 22, I'm going to have Ryan Tannehill. Look, I mean, this is the guy that is not going to have the starting position for the entirety of next year unless the Titans magically come out, shock the world, and win 13 plus games. Whether if it's Will Levis or Malik Willis, I'm only really expecting 13 or 14 games out of Ryan Tannehill this upcoming season. He's still a serviceable quarterback who protects the ball, and he can make some plays, but he just hasn't had much around him as far as weapons in his time in Tennessee. I will say now he does have D-Hop, right? But unless this team is a serious playoff contender, I can't see him finishing the year, because at the end of the day, Tennessee's going to have to see what they have in their young quarterbacks moving forward. And maybe, again, all three of the quarterbacks on the roster now are stepping stones for a guy like Caleb Williams. A guy like Caleb Williams out of USC is supposed to be that special, where you do drop everything you have for a chance at that next Patrick Mahomes, which he is compared to be. But Ryan Tannehill, like I said, serviceable guy, but he's just going to be a stepping stone for whoever takes over there in Tennessee. And finally, to close off this list at number 21, I'm going to go with Kenny Pickett. As a Browns fan, I didn't believe in this guy at all last season, but he's shown flashes, and he has the potential to be kind of have like that next T-Law jump, that T-Law level jump that he had this year, and I think if he can actually do it, Pittsburgh is going to be a lot more of a dangerous team. If Kenny Pickett can actually come out and win 10 plus games in this division, there's no doubt the quality of quarterback that he is. But Kenny Pickett, I just need to see a little bit more out of him going forward. But I do think he has the potential to take a Trevor Lawrence level jump this year and be Pittsburgh's for sure guy going forward. Moving over to number 16, or 20, excuse me. But we're going to have Justin Fields. He's not a better passer than some of the guys we've already listed, but he has the potential to be excellent. He has the potential to be great and really blow the guys that we've already listed out of the water in that category. And not to mention, he now has the pieces around him. This team has committed to him this offseason to really see what they have in Justin Fields. They surrounded him, like I said, both sides of the ball. And not to mention, Justin Fields is already in the conversation for one of the greatest rushing quarterbacks of all time, as he set a couple records last year. It's no doubt a make-or-break year for Justin Fields. You no doubt want to see improvement in his passing game, and that's going to be the biggest question this year. Can he do that to put this Chicago team over the top? As some would say, it is a wide open division. Moving over to my number 19 spot, we're going to have Geno Smith, a guy who came out of nowhere last season. From backup to Pro Bowler, from league minimum to $100+ million contract, and maybe the Seahawks guy going forward. But my fear for you guys, for Seahawks fans, is that it was a one-year wonder. And I know you've heard that before, but there's a chance this could be a Linsanity type of run. And with that uncertainty, he is this low for me, as I just want to see him do it one more year at this caliber, right? And to be clear, I do believe he will be good this season for Seattle, just not as good as he was last year. And if that is the case, I believe this is a fair ranking for him, about league average for the quarterback position. Moving over to Kyler Murray, if I can find him. And I know a lot of people hate him. I'm one of the few that actually like Kyler Murray. Even at his size, right? He's under 6 foot, but he still has a crazy rocket of an arm. He's a super dynamic playmaker with his legs and with the ball at sometimes, right? But most times he is a headache, and he does make terrible decisions with the ball. When you watch him, it feels like he's a high school quarterback at times, because he feels like he always has to make that big play to, get the fame or whatever it is. He's too immature enough to take what the defense gives him and to be very dynamic and consistent at that, because that can really put him into a different tier of quarterback. He just needs to mature a little at the end of the day, and maybe with a stable coaching staff for more than 1 year, his game can be more conservative and really go to that next level. But for me, again, I'm one of the few that like Kyler Murray, and for me, he's about a league average quarterback at the moment. Moving over to Daniel Jones at my number 17 spot. And I'll be honest, I've struggled to be a believer in this guy as far as being the franchise guy for a team going forward. But he has gotten a lot better each and every year in his career, and you have to applaud that. But most notably last year with Brian Daboll as his new head coach, he looked a lot more comfortable and he looked a lot more confident. And those are two really big traits you want in a franchise quarterback. And I believe that's why they paid him $100+ million, right? But everybody knows He can run the ball, right? But I believe the most underrated part of his game is the actual quarterback part of his game, right? His accuracy and his strength when he throws the ball. I mean, this team just brought in Darren Waller to give him a respectable weapon. But if Darren Waller goes down after 4 games, I think Daniel Jones is going to be in the same position he was last year. And we're going to be asking ourselves, what could he do with actual weapons? What if he had an actual decent wide receiver? And I think there's going to be a lot of questions that remain unanswered after next year, after this big contract. But regardless, I think Daniel Jones is a very underrated passer, very dynamic with his legs, as we all know, especially us fantasy players. But I think this is a fair ranking for him, about a league average, with the questions that we still have to answer as, is he as good as he was last year? Can he be consistent enough to do it again? Kind of like Geno Smith there. But moving over to Derek Carr at my number 16 quarterback, and it might seem low, right? But let me explain it to you, as it was well known that this guy was one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league until last year, for the last couple years of his career. But again, last year happened, and it might have been his worst career year. He's now in a new situation in New Orleans. He now maybe has the best overall weapons of his career at his disposal, with guys like Michael Thomas, Chris Olave looking to take a second-year superstardom leap, Juwan Johnson, Alvin Kamara, the list goes on, right? But we'll have to see if Derek Carr is going to be back to form, and if he can even take a step up with the best overall weapons of his career. But he's still a very good quarterback with a great arm, crazy strength. At times he can scramble. I think it's a big year for Derek Carr there in New Orleans, as I think they're the odds-on favorites to win that division, and rightfully so, with a very underrated guy still, I guess, in Derek Carr at the helm. But moving over to my number 15 spot, and if I can find him, we're going to go with Matt Stafford, right? A guy who fell down these rankings a lot for a lot of people after last year. But to be fair, I'm not as high as others on Matthew Stafford, as I do believe, no doubt, that he's lost a step, and a lot of that can be scrapped up due to his age and the wear and tear on his body. But also, I think he's also lost some power behind the ball. He's still an above-average guy in this league. I think he's a guy that can take you to the playoffs, even win you a couple games in the playoffs. But he's just gotten older, and I think he's just lost an overall step. And to me, if I'm building a franchise, I think I would want 14 other guys than Matt Stafford if I'm starting my team. And it might sound crazy. I know I'm not as high as others on Matt Stafford. But, hey, maybe he can change my mind after next season. I doubt it, though. Moving over to my number 14 spot, and call me biased, right? Call me biased all you want. But I'm going to go with Deshaun Watson, a guy who was well perceived as a top 5 quarterback in the entire league in his last few years there in Houston. But then he was traded, some stuff off the field took place, and a lot of people looked at him differently, right? It seems like everyone forgot the type of player that Deshaun Watson is. But after an 11-game suspension with his first year with the Browns and 800-plus days off of football, he finally returned to the field, and he tried to save the Browns' season. He tried to get them to the playoffs, right? What's new in the Browns organization? But he showed tons of rust, as we would expect, taking 800 days off from a professional sport. And again, his first year, you can scrap up to being unsuccessful in a way. But again, let's not act like this guy wasn't top 5 at his position. He wasn't a perennial Pro Bowler. He wasn't, top 5, top 10 in his position. One of the best talents at the position in the league. Again, I said position about 100 times, but he is a $260 man for a reason. And I know, I know that there's the possibility he might never return to a top 5 form, and that would be a Cleveland thing to do, to pay a guy that much money to never be that form. But again, I think the talent is there for this guy, the talent around him, and the coaching is there around him for him to get back to that level this year. And I think even if he plays at 80% of his Houston days, he is still going to be the 14th best quarterback in this league, right? And again, call me biased all you want, but I think that's fair for Deshaun Watson to be an above-average quarterback after really not playing for the last 3 years. Moving over to my number 13 quarterback, and that's going to be Jared Goff. Look, he started off his career great with the Rams, but many questioned how much of that was him or the coaching staff in Sean McVay, who I love, and the guys around him, right? Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd, all those stacked defenses that they had for those years. Was it the talent around him, or was it him? The reason why the Rams were going to the Super Bowl, right? But then he was later traded to Detroit to essentially die, in my opinion, because Detroit is kind of the place where you send players to die. But it actually helped him. It actually helped him turn this franchise around and his image around. And some would argue that this is a guy that is leading a team that could compete for a title this upcoming season. As if you look at a guy that can throw for 4,400 yards, 30 touchdowns, and less than 10 picks on a year in and year out basis, and then you can call him terrible. There's some stuff you have to learn, but those stats are the stats from Jared Goff the last 2 years. So Jared Goff is very underrated. He's going to be the leader, again, of a team that has title hopes this season. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out right there in Detroit. But they're definitely in a division that is kind of wide open, and I wouldn't throw it out of the realm of possibility that they can win a playoff game. But I think when you talk about Super Bowl contention, that's when you're pushing it there in Detroit. Regardless, my number 12 quarterback is going to be Russell Wilson. If you follow this channel at all, especially from the midseason mark last year, you know I'm still a believer in Russell Wilson. This is still a first ballot Hall of Famer who went to a new situation last year with a subpar head coach, and he had his worst career year. Not to mention the plethora of injuries on that offense. So nothing was in Russell Wilson's favor last year in Denver. Sean Payton is now the head coach, and he has resurged a lot of quarterbacks in the past, most notably Drew Brees. So I expect him to come in, Russell and Sean Payton, to figure a lot of things out. This offensive line was addressed this offseason. So I think Denver's going to be a very formidable team this year. I believe they can maybe flirt with 10 wins this year. But Russell Wilson will be the leader of that, as we would all expect. And I do expect a kind of a return to form for Russ this year. And again, maybe if they can win 10 or so games, they can grab a playoff spot. But Russell is my number 12 quarterback. Please, let's not forget the type of talent that Russell Wilson is. It's the same argument for Deshaun Watson. Let's not forget that after one bad year, he's this terrible quarterback. Moving over to my number 11 spot, it's going to be the most hated player in the NFL. And a large part of that is because he is Dallas' quarterback. But Dak Prescott, this guy has been elite his entire career aside from last year. He has steadily improved, and his offense has gotten better this offseason, most notably with the addition of Brandon Cooks. So this should be an offense that, again, will be a high-powered passing offense. Dak Prescott should have those games where he throws 60, 70 times. He is a true flamethrower. But I do worry about the quality of play calling after the departure of Kellen Moore, as Kellen Moore is now in Los Angeles. But even at Dak Prescott's very worst, I believe he's still the best game manager in the NFL. And hey, look, he's one of the best. He's one of the most clutch quarterbacks for a reason. And I think we overlook that a lot as far as team success here in Dallas. But Dak Prescott, I think he's kind of underrated. But at the same time, I think this is properly rated for Dak. He's not a top 10 quarterback in my opinion, but he's definitely not a league average quarterback. He's kind of in that fringe area between the two. Basically for me, I think number 11 is a fair spot there for Dak Prescott. Moving over to my number 10 quarterback, might raise some eyebrows, but I'm going to go with Tua Tagovailoa. That's obviously a joke, but Tua Tagovailoa, one of the most underrated players in the league, in the league, let alone quarterbacks. But he's one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the league, and I believe Tua, the more time that him and Mike McDaniel spend together, the more dangerous this offense will be this year, and the more dangerous and untapped potential we'll see from Tua this year, as he's a part of one of the most dynamic offenses in the NFL. Need I remind you, I believe this team can win the AFC East and even compete for a Super Bowl. I gave them a 5% chance or something like that. I think this team has that much potential on both sides of the ball, and it all starts with Tua and his health. Because, hey, is he a concussion away from retiring, right? That is a worry there for Miami and for Tua's sake. But if he's on the field, we know the talent that he is, and he has the weapons to be dynamic, even if he is injured. So to me, Tua is a top 10 quarterback, and my number 9 quarterback is going to be Captain Kirk Cousins. No, this isn't because he's on the thumbnail, and no, this isn't because of the quarterback series, But I do think that series opened a lot of people's eyes on Kirk Cousins, right? And that this ranking is not going to be viewed as crazy as it would have maybe before that series or even a year ago, right? But Captain Kirk Cousins, Mr. Consistency, and he's still one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the game. He's one of the best game managers in the league, and given the right situation around him, like last year, he could put your team in a situation to compete at a high level. No doubt to me, my number 9 quarterback in the NFL, as he's not number 10. I think he's just firmly at number 9. I think that is actually the perfect spot for Kirk Cousins. No doubt, a top 10 guy in the league for me this upcoming season. But moving over to number 8, I'm going to go with Trevor Lawrence. And this might be premature, but let me explain. I think this guy is Joe Burrow Jr., as he took a huge step last year under Doug Peterson. And this offense added Calvin Ridley, a guy who was a top 10 receiver in the league when he was playing and not gambling. If you follow this channel at any point this offseason, you know that I have loved Trevor Lawrence, and I have big expectations for Jacksonville this year. I believe Trevor Lawrence can win the MVP. Doug Peterson can be top 2 or even win the Coach of the Year. I believe Jacksonville will have the best overall record in the league, given their situation with the weak division, right? And it's all of this is not out of the realm of possibility, but it all starts with another jump from Trevor Lawrence, as I think a guy like Trevor Lawrence can take a jump and a rise into like the top 5 category after next season. But again, if he comes out and plays exactly like he did, you could still argue he's a top 5 quarterback. So Trevor Lawrence, definitely a special talent at the position. But for me, he's going to be at my number 7 or 8 quarterback as of right now. But my number 7 quarterback will be Lamar Jackson. This is the greatest rushing quarterback of all time, and he'll have the opportunity to finally untap some passing potential this season, as Todd Monken was brought in, and all reports say that this team, to take that next step in the playoffs, to win some playoff games, they know what they have to do, and that is pass the ball, as well as complement the running game. But they have to be a more dynamic offense through the air, and luckily for them, they have a quarterback that has the potential to do that. And they also have a quarterback that, when he does play, even not passing the ball as much, he still wins like 75% of his games. And so it all comes down for Lamar and his health this upcoming year and how much he's available for his team. But on any given year, this is a guy that could be a top 5 quarterback, can win the MVP. He's that special of a talent. But to me, Lamar is my number 7 quarterback going into next season. My number 6 quarterback, and this is the biggest debate I had. It was either Justin Herbert or my number 5 guy. And to me, I went with Justin Herbert as my number 6th quarterback in the NFL. I still have big expectations for him this year, right? I've seen some people say that he's going to have 5,000 yards and 50-plus touchdowns. That's obviously optimistic, but the new offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, who led that pass-happy offense in Dallas last year that I mentioned earlier, that's a big reason right behind all of these big expectations for Justin Herbert this year. But this team added maybe the best wide receiver in the draft class in Quentin Johnson. This offense with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, even Josh Palmer, right? But other guys like Austin Eckler. I can't believe it took me that long to note Austin Eckler. But this offense has a ton of weapons. They should explode this year in a division that intends for shootouts. And it all starts with Justin Herbert taking a huge leap this year, maybe getting in the MVP conversations. Again, I wouldn't be mad if he's in the top 5 for you. But again, my number 5 guy, I don't think you're going to be too mad when you see who it is. As again, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. Aaron freaking Rodgers, a guy who is now the newest New York Jet quarterback. And maybe this is a nostalgic trip, right? But I don't know. Maybe it's because I've watched Aaron Rodgers my entire life watching football, right? I don't have a real connection to him. I'm not a Packers fan. But it's still Aaron Rodgers. He's the newest quarterback for the Jets in an offense that should explode with him under center. And it's still, he's still the prettiest thrower of the football I've ever seen. Probably I'll ever see. And that's including guys like Patrick Mahomes and these young guys that we have in the league that are super talented. But Aaron Rodgers is still the prettiest thrower of the football. He just makes it look so effortless. And he's in a new situation with a lot of weapons. Maybe they need some time to mesh this year. So as far as team success, they might not have it this year. But I think as far as talent, Aaron Rodgers is still Aaron Rodgers. He's still that guy. And hopefully he doesn't fizzle out there in New York like his mentor did there after he left Green Bay, Brett Favre, right? But moving over to my number 4 quarterback, we're going to go with Jalen Hurts. This might be premature, again, just like Trevor Lawrence, after only one elite season. But after just one season, this is a guy that I can say is one of the most complete quarterbacks in the NFL. He's an elite passer, Jalen Hurts is. He had 22 touchdowns through the air, only 6 interceptions, so he takes care of the ball and at a high level. He's an elite runner. He had 800 plus yards on the ground, 13 touchdowns on the ground, so he can run and pass, and he's a winner. He had a 14-1 record last year with the Philadelphia Eagles as the starting quarterback. He led his team to the Super Bowl, and again, this might be the most complete team in the league again next year. So Jalen Hurts is going to be that key to push them over the top to win a Super Bowl. But to me, even after just one elite year, Jalen Hurts is he's a top 4 quarterback here in the NFL. Moving over to my number 3 spot, and this is where a debate is happening. But for me, it's not a debate. It is not a debate, and let me be clear about that. But Josh Allen is my number 3 quarterback here in the NFL. This is still a guy that's 6'5" with the strongest arm in the league. He's the hardest guy to take down for edge rushers. So he's the hardest guy to sack at 6'5", and he has the strongest arm in the league. And not to mention, he's one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the league over the last 5 years, as he had 38 touchdowns on the ground. Absolutely insane stuff at his size. But he still has some of the best instincts in the pocket. Again, maybe one of the most hardest guys to take down. So the play is always alive with Josh Allen under center is my basic assessment, right? But he is super aggressive with the ball, and he does make poor decisions with the ball from time to time. But I think the top 2 guys are just simply better at the end of the day, and that's just personal preference. Again, Bills Mafia, don't put me through a table. But my number 2 guy is going to be Joe Burrow, right? I've said this before last offseason, right? Before going into last year, I said this take, and a lot of people called me crazy. But I think now others are catching on. As Joe Burrow, again, my number 2 quarterback in the NFL, he doesn't do much wrong on the field. As he's accurate, he can run, he's tough, he's a winner. No one puts more fear in my heart as an opposing team than Joe Burrow. And yes, that includes the number 1 guy in the league, which we all know. But I believe this will be the year that Joe Burrow gets his first Super Bowl. I have him as my title favorite. I think this team is primed and ready, as there's questions on whether T. Higgins will be back or not. Regardless, I think he's going to play out of his mind. We know Jamar Chase is there. This offense is there. The defense is very underrated. I think it all starts with Joe Burrow at the quarterback position, and I think he is the number 2 player in the league. And that is, of course, because Pat Mahomes is the number 1 guy. Do I need to explain this one? I mean, this guy is closer to the GOAT argument than the second best quarterback in the league. So Pat Mahomes, my number 1 guy. No surprise there. But again, this is a guy that's maybe, he can go out there again and repeat as Super Bowl champions and have 3 rings in his early career. No doubt it's a possibility. But Patrick Mahomes, again, closer to the GOAT argument than the second best in the league. But that is my list here. You see on the bottom, we left a lot of guys out. These are guys that are either backups or just weren't worth mentioning, right? I mean, maybe Trey Lance or maybe a guy like Zach Wilson, right? But I'm not going to mention these guys. These guys aren't going to get a lot of playing time. I think the guy who get the most on this list is probably Andy Dalton, right? But I didn't want to include those guys. These are the guys that are worth note the most in the NFL. And those are the top 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. If you want to look at it from a ranking standpoint, look from right to left. I know it's kind of confusing, but for example, Pat Mahomes is my 1, Aaron Rodgers is my 5, Herbert's my 6, 2 is my 10th, right? Baker's my 26th best quarterback in the league when, the Bryce Young and the rookies are all tied kind of for 32 there. But that is my list. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this down below. Let me know what you would change down below. But without further ado, that's going to do it for today's episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Again, we're on the road to 500 subs on the channel. So please subscribe to the channel, drop a like, all that good stuff. And we will see you guys tomorrow for some fantasy football content, as we're going to be giving you guys my updated rankings. Should be tons of fun, so stay tuned for that. But until then, stay happy, stay healthy. We're out.